It was more just like I just wanted him to stop. So it was just relief the second that he did.
And he just abruptly stopped?
Yeah, he just literally punched at foot 4 times, picked up his hat and ran full speed.
And did you see which direction he headed off in?
I didn't even look. I know he ran towards Beechwood, but I didn't see if he turned left or right. I didn't even turn around to check he was gone. Somehow I just knew he was.
And then, so what did you do after he took off?
So I got to my feet and got my phone out of my armband and rang my partner and said, I need help quick. And then I stood there and yelled help for a bit, but realised no one would hear me in the walkway. So I managed to walk to the road where I found a girl that helped me call an ambulance.
And then some other passerbys, I understand, wandered by as well.
I think the German girl passed the phone to them so that they could speak to the ambulance, and she just sat with me and gave me water and comforted me.
You must have been in complete shock.
Yeah, at that point I could barely breathe, so that they were asking me all these questions, but I was just trying to catch my breath and I was in agony, so I just was sort of a blur.
Yeah, tell me about your injuries.
So the worst is my shoulder, so that's I have a dislocated AC joint, so that's pretty bad, and then my elbow's all bruised and sore, which I think I must have landed on as well. I've had vertigo for the last week, which I think is obviously from being hit in the head. And I've just had cuts and bruises on my ankle and knee and fist and everywhere.
So those are the physical injuries, but what about you? How are you doing?
I think I'm doing really well considering, that's the best I could be. I'm feeling a lot more comfortable, being alone again. At first I was a lot more worried, but I think I'm doing as best as I can.
So do you feel safe to go out and about again? Would you go out jogging or walking again on your own?
Yeah, I definitely would, but I won't go down any walkways or any quiet areas, only main roads.
So have you had to take some time off work to recuperate?
Yeah, so I've already had, I think this is my 3rd week off work. I'm hoping that I'll be able to go back to work maybe part-time next week, but I'll just have to see how I go.
Yeah. So what are the police saying to you about this?
They've been so helpful. I've met so many different police already, all coming to do different things. They've been amazing, just keeping me informed, and they've still got a whole team working on it, so they've been really helpful.
So I'm wondering, you've probably thought about this a lot. Have you thought about what this guy was up to or what his motivations were and all that kind of stuff? What's going through your head?
Yeah, I guess it's just crazy. You think, what is he getting out of it? All he's doing is hurting women and then running away. It's not like he wants anything more. It just doesn't make any sense. I just think he must have something, really wrong going on in his head.
So what would you say to people out there who may recognise this man and the CCTV footage that the police have put out? What would you say to anyone who has any clues to who he is?
Just to please ring the police or the number that's on all the ads and stuff, because he's not going to stop. And I think there's been 4 of us now, and he could be getting worse each time. And you don't know, when he's throwing people on the ground, is he going to injure someone and hit them in their head? And he needs to be stopped. So somebody has to call if they know anything.
Would you want to say anything to him if he was listening?
I guess just that people don't deserve this, and he's ruining people's lives, and he just needs to get help.
And that was one of the women who was beaten by the serial attacker who is preying on lone women who are walking and jogging. Now, police say people should report any suspicious activity in those areas, the Browns Bay Walkway area, immediately by phoning 111. And anyone with information on the attacks or about the CCTV footage or who may have clues to this man's identity, you could also call Crime Stoppers anonymously on 0800 555 111. The number again, 0800 555 111. The National Party has put gangs squarely in its crosshairs, proposing that an elite police team be set up, modelled on Australia's Strike Force Raptor unit. The idea is one of a series of proposals outlined in the opposition party's Law and Order discussion document released today. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
Police In New South Wales, they're known as Strike Force Raptor, an elite police squad set up a decade ago to target outlaw bikies. Their tactics on display in this 9 News footage. National wants a team like it here in New Zealand, a task force dedicated to making gang members' lives hell.
The government I lead will harass and disrupt gangs every single day I am Prime Minister, with the single-minded goal of eliminating them.
Simon Bridges is proposing a police unit like that in Australia to come after gang members for everything from parking fines to punch-ups. Gang pads would be turned over too, with a crackdown on unconsented work or liquor licence breaches.
These are not friendly motorcycle clubs, despite their PR and the job they're trying to do on New Zealanders. They harass New Zealanders, they peddle misery and violence and drugs, and it is not on.
The latest figures show gang numbers are up 26% since Labour took power, but the government says the trend began under National and is largely due to Australia booting criminals back over the ditch.
National have got to do what they've got to do. This government, what we've been doing is working.
The Corrections Minister, Kelvin Davis, is critical of the opposition's single-minded focus on gangs.
Everything that this government is doing is all designed to stop people going to prison in the first place. But if they do end up in prison, making sure that they come out as better people at the other end and can return to their communities, their families, and be contributing members of society.
Gangs have got their claws into middle New Zealand.
The opposition's war on gangs goes even wider. It's proposing tougher sentencing and parole conditions, even asking its supporters whether those found guilty of gang offending should lose the right to parole altogether. And the revival of a well-worn proposal, a ban on patches and insignia in public places.
The intimidation bling, it's not right, it's not on, and we won't have tolerance for it.
A Black Power Life member, Dennis O'Reilly, knows that type of rhetoric well. He's warning a hardline hellfire approach will backfire.
When you start to try and oppress people, and this is what you're talking about, people find ways to resist oppression. So, the law of unintended consequences and be careful what you wish for and all that sort of stuff. I don't think it's a particularly sound way of going about things.
But the steely focus is unlikely to ease. Indeed, it appears to be only ramping up, with National promising to release a more comprehensive gang plan next year as the election inches closer. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
It is almost 22 after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback as always. Interested in what you think of that justice document released by National today. Do we need a strike force of armed police to harass the gangs, as the National Party puts it? A ban on gang patches is one of the other things, but they are offering a second chance to young offenders who have just a single conviction with less than 2 years in jail. They could get a clean slate by age 25. Let us know what you think of all of that. Text us on 2101. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, and our email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Samoa's measles epidemic has killed 32 people. It's the second day in a row the death toll has increased. All but 4 of the deaths are children under the age of 4. And a mass vaccination campaign has been hampered by an unauthorised clinic that's now under investigation. Mackenzie Smith reports.
It's an epidemic that's becoming worse by the day. On Tuesday, Samoa confirmed the death toll had risen by 7 in less than 24 hours. In that time, another 243 measles cases were recorded. 176 people remain in hospital. Our correspondent in Apia, Aotangawhaya Tipi Aotangawhaya, says the figures are alarming.
We are just hoping that the vaccination, the mass vaccination, which is underway both in Upolu and Hawaii Island, will have some sort of relief in the next week or two.
The latest count is a sharp rise since a state of emergency was declared 2 weeks ago. At the time, there were just 6 deaths. Information has trickled out in press releases from a government which for 2 weeks has brushed off interview requests by RNZ Pacific. An immunisation expert at the University of Auckland, Dr. Helen Patosis-Harris, says the figures could be even worse than reported.
You don't have enough detail sometimes just take these sort of estimates. Like, for example, are they counting their cases accurately? Are they capturing them all, or are they missing some, for example? Can we be sure that what's being notified is the real number?
As the crisis worsens, medical assistance has poured in from overseas. New Zealand has deployed dozens of nurses to ease hospitals overburdened with patients seeking measles vaccines. Samoa's Director General of Health, Leausa Dr. Take Nasere, says the support has been tremendous. But on Saturday, he appealed for more help.
Our staff has been able to cope with this, but we are also mindful that they'll be getting tired. So this is why we are calling for help.
Meanwhile, 60 measles vaccines have been destroyed at a local clinic in Samoa for safety reasons. Speaking at a press conference on Monday, Leausa Dr. Take Nasere said the clinic took them without authorisation. He says the provider has been investigated by the Ministry of Health.
They were not stored in that specialised fridge where it has to maintain the temperature. So we have to maintain that standard.
Leausa says at least one nurse at the clinic is also under investigation.
There was no agreement, no standards, and these nurses are not vaccinators.
The government didn't name the provider, but the Agape Jal Clinic on Tuesday accused the Ministry of Health of a smear campaign. It says it's provided vaccinations for the past 3 weeks in line with local regulations, although it admits to charging a $14 fee for services. The fee was likely a sticking point in a country where measles vaccinations have been made free and mandatory under law. Prime Minister Tuilaepa Sailele Malialengaoi last week appealed to private medical practices to join the public sector effort to vaccinate Samoans. For Checkpoint, Mackenzie Smith.
New Zealand Cricket says if it finds the person accused of racially abusing English paceman Jofra Archer, it will refer them to the police and ban them for life. The 24-year-old bowler says he was abused by a spectator as he was walking off the field at Bay Oval, Mount Maunganui, after being dismissed. He hasn't said exactly what was yelled out at him. New Zealand Cricket CEO David White told Alex Perrottet he drove to Hamilton today to apologise directly to the player.
I just apologised to him from New Zealand Cricket. I said it was unacceptable. It's something that he should not have to go through in our country, and we were very disappointed and just expressed our disappointment to him.
And how did he take it? What did he say?
Listen, he was a very pleasant, polite young man. He was, I think, grateful that I'd made the effort to go and see him, and thanked me for the message.
Jofra Archer has been really active on social media. He's got a great sense of humour. He's captured the attention of cricketers and cricket fans around the world, particularly around the World Cup and since. When it comes to this issue, though, there is no joking around whatsoever. What was the discussion with New Zealand Cricket about how to react to this?
So, when we found out, we were very concerned and disappointed. We wanted to front foot the issue straight away, so we put out a statement to that effect. And our team now at the moment is just going through the security footage to see whether we can find the person responsible. And if we get any information, we'll be sharing that with everyone in the near future.
Are you confident you'll be able to find the person? I mean, it's Bay Oval, Mount Maunganui. It's not a big place, and as you said, you've got the footage there. You're confident you'll be able to track the person down?
I wouldn't say confident. I would say that we'll give it our best shot to try and find the person. So they're working through that now.
And are you working with the police as well?
No, we're not working with the police. However, I'm saying that if we did find the person, we would certainly let the police know.
And are you asking people who might have information to come forward?
Well, the team are working on it now, so we haven't been proactive in that sense. We're just reviewing the footage at the moment.
Right. Look, David, do you know what exactly was said? Did Jofra open up about that?
No, we didn't get into that detail, but as I understand it, it wasn't very pleasant.
Right, and it was obviously, I think he said it was while he was batting, is that right?
My understanding is it was when he was walking off the field after he got out.
Right, okay. And so in terms of the relations with the England cricket team, they've been obviously very competitive in the last 6 months, but players from both teams getting along well. Did you? I don't know. Did you feel any change to that mood when you were down there today in Hamilton?
No, not at all. We've actually had some great tussles with England over the last 3 or 4 years. Been some tremendous battles. The players compete hard on the field, of course, but a mutual respect there, and always played in a very good spirit. We've got a close working relationship with the English Cricket Board, and that'll continue. I informed their CEO, Tom Harrison, immediately and let him know, and I've spoken to their team manager as well. And listen, we're working very closely together on this, and we share mutual values and approach to cricket.
It's just so disappointing, isn't it? A fantastic test match came down to the last session on the 5th day, a great win for the Black Caps. I guess you're a bit disappointed that just, the actions of one person have provided such a sour distraction.
Yeah, listen, it was just fantastic, wasn't it? Magnificent weather, great ground, great crowd, and a fantastic game of cricket. So we were delighted with that. It couldn't have been better, really. And just one person spoiling it at the end. But we've got another test match starting on Friday in Hamilton, and looking forward to that. I know the players will be looking forward to that, so that the focus is on playing in the game.
Finally, David, as you said, it's one person. I imagine there's the temptation when these sorts of things happen to say, oh gosh, it's just one person, let's ignore it and move on. It was a fantastic match. Why is it important to you to stop, to turn around and to take the action you've taken today, driving all the way down to Hamilton to apologise in person? Why is that important to you?
Well, one person is one person too many as far as we're concerned. Listen, it's very important for New Zealand cricket that all our fans and our players feel safe. They're in a safe environment. We want it to be a family environment going to cricket in New Zealand. And the values of cricket in New Zealand are very important to us. So, we've got to strive to keep that and just keep working hard on being good people and showing good values.
And that's New Zealand cricket boss David White talking to Alex Perrottet. And coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, the Health Minister says the Hepatitis Foundation's excessive spending on travel and lavish dinners is unacceptable. A Pacifica woman is thankful she's escaped a mouldy and damp nightmare rental property. And National reveals it would expect judges to hand out tougher sentences if it wins the next election. I'll talk to its Justice spokesperson, Mark Mitchell, after 6. And we'd love to hear from you on anything you've heard on the program so far this evening. Text us on 2101. You can send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz is our address, or tweet us at checkpointrnz. Let's get to Susanna now with the headlines.
A jogger viciously beaten by a serial attacker preying on women in 2 Auckland suburbs is appealing to the man to get help, or for anyone with clues to his identity to come forward. The woman was running on a North Shore path last month when a man attacked her from behind. She has told Checkpoint how she was thrown to the ground and repeatedly punched in one of 4 similar attacks identified by police so far. A Black Power Life member is warning of a potential backlash if National follows through on its proposed gang crackdown. The party is positioning itself as tough on crime, today floating policies to eliminate gangs. Dennis O'Reilly says the plan is inspired by hate and oppression and is not a sound way of going about things. Meanwhile, the police have arrested 5 men in relation to the death of Cody Wilkinson. The mongrel mob member was found dead at a house in Bunnythorpe in late September. The group faced charges of murder and kidnapping, as well as participating in an organised criminal group, and they're to appear in court in Palmerston North tomorrow. The Health Minister David Clark says the findings of extravagant spending against the top brass of the Hepatitis Foundation are unacceptable. The foundation and key government agencies are refusing to front over a damning report from the regulator, Charity Services. The findings have been kept secret for more than a year until RNZ revealed them today. Britain is demanding China allow United Nations observers immediate and unfettered access to the Xinjiang region. The call follows a government data leak revealing how hundreds of thousands of Muslims have been mistreated in high-security camps. About 1 million people, mostly from the Muslim Uyghur community, are thought to have been detained without trial, and the documents show how inmates are indoctrinated and punished. One person has died after a serious crash in Taihape in the central North Island. The police were called to the crash just after 3:30 and 3 other people were also injured. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna, and thank you for joining us. If you're just tuning in, this is Checkpoint, and I'm Lisa Owen, and Nona Peltier has joined me in the studio to talk business. Nona, retail spending hits its best level for the year. What are the numbers?
Yeah, pretty good numbers, actually, and better than the market was expecting, even at the top end. So 1.6%, those are the seasonally adjusted numbers over the quarter, and then over the year, a 4% increase. Well, those are fairly substantial numbers, which shows that what the Reserve Bank governor wanted was people to go out and spend. Well, they have. They've been going out and spending, and mostly what they're buying are electronics and other household goods. Sales volumes were up in most categories, including groceries and so on. Fuel prices were down, so that just shows you there was an offsetting effect there. And so basically big screen TVs were very popular with the Rugby World Cup. And
those are substantial purchases, sort of indicating a level of confidence, perhaps.
Yes, but the economists we spoke to suggested that even though spending is up, that isn't an economy running at a red-hot speed here. So it would seem that we still have some way to go, and the forecast is still for a slowing economy. However, I'm sure that leading up to Christmas, retailers will hope there's some momentum in the spending that we've seen in the third quarter that was ended September 30th.
Okay, so Sky City, well, it's confirming that insurance will cover the fire damage to the International Convention Centre and Horizon Hotel. And what are they saying about that?
Well, there's two bits of the insurance. One is the insurance that covers the contracted works that Fletcher Construction is undertaking, and the other is the third-party liability. So that would be incidental damage, say the cars that were in the garage that were flooded, that sort of thing. And that will be seen and assessed on a claim-by-claim basis. So it's not blanket. If you need some money, just come to Sky City. They'll see what they can do for you. It won't be like that. However, we don't know exactly still how much damage the building, that's the International Convention Centre, sustained. That's still being work undertaken, as well as structural assessment and even just the cause of the fire. But Sky City and Fletcher Building both made statements to the markets today saying that they were committed to undertaking the work. From Fletcher Building's point of view, they also said that at the moment, the provisions they made, these are cost provisions they made to complete the building, are still within the estimate they provided in February 2018. Now, that's subject to change, but we won't know more about that until February when Fletcher Building puts out its first half result.
Okay. Hey, I'm interested in this Westpac Australia unfolding saga. So this is the executives not getting any bonuses that you were telling us about yesterday. So is more coming out?
Yes. So a number of things happened, I suppose, overnight. And today, the chief executive of Westpac Australia, that's the group, is leaving immediately, and they're on the hunt for a replacement for him. So he's gone, and the chair is brought forward his retirement. He's also going. So right at the top of the company, or the bank, they're moving on.
Have they said why expressly?
Well, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? 23 million instances of not complying with the law. That would be enough for anybody to kind of take pause. So I guess they hoped they could ride out the storm, but that was not to be. And interestingly, the Standard & Poor's have come out and said that the next couple of years are going to be tough for Australian banks following this. And they said the best thing that can happen now is for Westpac to clear the deck, start fresh, and hopefully not make the same mistakes they've made in the past.
Okay, let's take a twirl around the markets. What have you got for us?
Well, I just wanted to say that from Sky City and Fletcher Building share price rose 2.5% today as a result of that announcement, and Sky City's was also up 2%. Overall, the NZX Top 50 Index finished really strongly, and you'll be impressed to know that it rose 0.8% by 91 points to 11,045. We're back into those 11,000s for you.
Yeah.
I know you like that number. And the dollar's trading at 64.2 US cents, 94.7 Australian, so that's been creeping up, and 49.8 British pence.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier with our business update. The government's sending a warning to motorists with faulty airbags. If you don't get them fixed, you won't be getting a warrant of fitness. The Takata Alpha airbags have caused injuries and fatalities overseas due to faulty deployment, and the recall of affected cars is one of the biggest in New Zealand history. The dodgy airbags have been removed from about 85% of affected cars, but the Transport Agency wants a final push in the remaining weeks of the year. And today, the Commerce and Consumer Affairs Minister revealed more than 10,000 cars have yet to be fixed. Katie Todd reports.
In the busy mechanic workshop at Honda Cars Christchurch, a small hatchback is getting its Takata Alpha airbag inflator replaced. It's a 5-minute process to pluck out the tiny cylinder and swap it, at no cost to the owner, but it might save them from hundreds of deadly sharp slivers of metal exploding from the steering wheel or dashboard in a crash. Since the country's largest compulsory vehicle recall was launched last April, about 70,000 cars have gone through the process. Manufacturers and Transport Agency staff have written to every other car owner who could be affected. But today, Commerce and Consumer Affairs Minister Chris Farfoy revealed about 12,000 cars remain on the register. Some might have even passed their latest warrant, but that's about to change.
If someone goes in for a warrant as of January the 1st next year and they've got a car that is flagged as having an Alpha airbag but it hasn't been repaired, it won't get their warrant of fitness until that is changed out.
Any new imports that might have the Takata Alpha airbags have been stopped at the border. Chief Executive of the Motor Industry Association, David Crawford, says most of the vehicles on the register were imported as used cars. They include Hondas, BMWs, Isuzus, Mazdas, Nissans and Toyotas, and those manufacturers will pay for the repairs.
These cars are typically in the age of about 2002 to around about 2014, but the bulk of them are 2002 to around about 2010-year-old cars, and they are both New Zealand new and used imported vehicles.
The Takata Alpha airbags have caused injuries and fatalities overseas due to faulty deployment, but to date there's been no incidents with them on New Zealand roads. But Transport Agency spokesman Michael Aitken says people can't assume they're safe.
That's great that it hasn't been in New Zealand, but any one of these at any time could cause the sort of damage, serious injury or death. So they're just a high risk. It may or may not happen, but it's just too big a risk to have driving around the country.
Chris Farfoy says reaching every last car won't be easy, but he's pleased with progress to date.
I think it's going to be tough because some of the cars have been on the road since 2004. Some of them might not be on the road again, or on someone's front lawn, not being used anymore. We're really happy with 85%. To this stage, we didn't think we were going to get this far when we set out on this journey. So that I think is kudos to the way that we've worked collectively alongside the sector as well.
Anyone who thinks they might need to bring in their cars for a new airbag inflator can visit the Right Car website to check. In Christchurch, for Checkpoint, ko Katie Todd, Tēnei.
Secondary school principals around the country are increasingly worried by delays to regulate the vaping industry. More than 60 health, community and school organisations have written an open letter outlining concerns, saying young people need to be better protected. They're appealing to the Associate Minister of Health, Jenny Salisa, to fast-track legislation. And it's even getting the support of the vaping industry. Amy Williams reports.
Principals say some of their students are getting around the R18 restriction on vape liquid containing nicotine and are becoming addicted to it. Auckland Secondary Principals Association is among signatories to the open letter sent to Associate Minister of Health, Jenny Salisa. Its president, Richard Dykes, says many schools are not sure how to help students addicted to vaping.
I've talked and heard stories from around the country of schools who are saying, what do we do? We have now got students addicted to nicotine from vaping. Now what do we do? whereas it was being promoted as a smoking cessation product. Well, now we've got adolescents addicted to nicotine, and then what do we do? Where do we go now?
Mr. Dykes says the vaping industry's self-regulation isn't working. He'd like to see restrictions similar to tobacco placed on vaping.
Let's get licensed dealers. Let's look at the range of products that are available. Let's look at licensing those people who sell it. Let's put significant curbs on the marketing. We're really concerned about the marketing that is clearly targeting young people.
The open letter is also signed by health organisations, including the Medical Association, ASH and the Cancer Society. The organisations say delays to regulate vaping aren't in the best interests of children or smokers who want to quit. They're asking the Associate Minister to urgently table the Smoke-Free Environments Amendment vaping bill for a first reading. The Vaping Trade Association represents 50 independent e-cigarette sellers. Spokesperson Jonathan Devry says the industry needs guidelines and regulations, and it's a massive concern that young people, including children, are vaping.
The vendors underneath the VTANS Association all understand that you cannot, that these products are 18, that they cannot be sold to youth. We obviously want to limit youth access and work with the government to ensure that it's damn near impossible for youth to get these hands on these products.
Mr. Devry says the Vaping Trade Association has offered to share data with the ministry, but has been stonewalled. He says the lack of communication has been frustrating.
We've reached out a number of times and it's pretty much just been stonewalled. We've made it very clear that we're open to talk, open to communicate, share resources, share data, which would be of incredible benefit when regulating an industry that has been to a degree self-regulating over the last 5 years.
The government said it'd start work on regulations for vaping, smokeless tobacco products and electronic cigarettes this time last year. In a statement, Associate Minister of Health, Jenny Salesa, says new legislation is a priority and it remains her goal to introduce a bill this parliamentary term. Ms Salesa says it's a detailed technical bill and it's taking time to work through the details. She says the government wants to make sure vaping is available for smokers who want to quit, while ensuring it's not marketed or sold to children and young people. ASH is among organisations that have signed the open letter. Its director, Deborah Hart, says its annual Year 10 smoking survey will show vaping is widespread among teenagers.
We are seeing different rates across the board, but the Year 10 survey enables us to have really solid research and information so that we can target what the problem actually is.
Ms Hart says the national results of the survey are due out early next year. Until then, New Zealand could see America's best-selling e-cigarette brand set up shop. Juul has indicated it'll start selling products here by the end of this year, but has been besieged by legal troubles, including multiple investigations by Congress, federal agencies and several state attorneys general. It set up a New Zealand company in July, but its vaping products have yet to hit the shelves here. For Checkpoint, Amy Williams.
It's about 13 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let us know whether you think vaping is a problem among students. What kind of regulation do we need? And is advertising and marketing for vaping being policed well enough? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ and our email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Do get in touch. The Health Minister has called out the Hepatitis Foundation over extravagant expenses and gross mismanagement, saying it's unacceptable. The regulator, Charities Services, completed its investigation into the foundation more than a year ago, but the findings have been kept secret until RNZ revealed them today. The lead investigator recommended the findings be published on the Charities Services website, but the regulator chose not to. The foundation's received millions of taxpayer dollars through the Health Ministry. Our political reporter Jo Moyer has the latest.
The Hepatitis Foundation spent more than $128,000 on travel for its board chairperson, Chris Cunningham, in just over 2 years, and paid for lavish dinners at top Auckland restaurants. It also could not account for thousands of dollars of credit card expenses. But the man who set up the foundation is appalled by the board chairperson's behaviour and the time it's taken for an investigation to be made public. It was Sandy Milne's complaint that led to a 2-year investigation by the charity's services.
I'm ashamed that so-called health professionals should be party to this use of public money, and in my view they've been neglecting patients.
He says in its early years he ran the foundation on the smell of an oily rag.
I made the money stretch, and then I see that this guy spent $13,500 on one trip at fairs, and one trip he didn't need to go to anyway. I am incensed, actually.
Health Minister David Clark says the extravagant expenses uncovered by an investigation into the foundation were concerning.
Well, I think what was shown in the investigations was unacceptable. I think all involved have accepted that, and I'm pleased to see that people are learning the lessons and are going to do things differently in the future.
Mr Clark wouldn't say whether Mr Cunningham should resign, suggesting that question was better directed at the ministry. But the regulator Charity Services is satisfied the foundation has strengthened its governance and tightened its spending policies, so it didn't refer the charity for deregistration. The former chief executive, John Hornell, left the foundation in 2015 after 18 years, 13 as chief executive. Mr Hornell attended the dinners in question. He says he always felt uncomfortable about them, but never refused to go. He described them as being extravagant events at fancy restaurants, costing thousands of dollars. Mr Hornell says the regulator has massively let down taxpayers, and in particular the hepatitis community.
The hepatitis B and the hepatitis C community has been let down badly because of this. They should have known well before this. They should have known where the money that was received from the ministry to the Hepatitis Foundation for their care, where it went, or some of it went, and they didn't. They've only heard snippets throughout the last 4 or 5 years.
So does he think the report is an accurate account of what went on?
No, I don't. I think it underplays exactly what the situation was. I think the report doesn't justify why a certain person, i.e. the chair board, was travelling all over the globe, not just to conferences, but to other meetings where he actually didn't have to. He could have easily have done it through the internet, through Skype or FaceTime.
As for Professor Cunningham, Mr Hornell has a message for him too.
It's a bit of a cop-out, and I think if Chris Cunningham has got any manner, he would resign as chairman of the board given his behaviour over the last few years.
Professor Cunningham didn't respond to calls from RNZ, and the Hepatitis Foundation declined to be interviewed. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Joe Moyer.
A Pacifica woman now living in Flaxmere in Hawke's Bay is thankful she's escaped a mouldy and damp nightmare rental property that was meant to be her first slice of Kiwi paradise. Talalele Hefa moved to New Zealand from Tonga in July, 5 months pregnant with her husband, but escaped the rental property just recently because it was affecting the health of her and her family. As Jonathan Mitchell reports, mould is being described as a much bigger threat to human health than the Class A drug methamphetamine.
It was probably the worst introduction to New Zealand anyone could dream of during the height of winter. Talalele Hefa, her husband and extended family moved into a rental property in Flaxmere in July, but the cracks started to appear.
The firework is not working, everything is not working, bathroom is leaking, also that the bathroom is broken as well. So we try our best to get the landlord, but they're not even helping us to be done all of that stuff.
She was worried about her health and the health of her unborn baby.
Because that time I was on, I carrying my son that time. So I was scared about my son as well. At least I carry him, but at least he's sick as well when I breathing all the motor like that.
To make matters worse, the landlord wanted to charge her for the repair work that needed to be done. She refused and got help from the Hawke's Bay District Health Board's Healthy Housing Program. And now the family live in a new rental, which is dry and ventilated. A social worker on the housing team, Galen Best, says mould is worse than methamphetamine in homes.
Mould especially is more detrimental to a house than pee, so educating not only the tenants, the landlords and the subsidies that are available through the council has really helped with addressing the issues around ventilation and mould and stuff.
Alice Peacock also works as a social worker with the Healthy Housing Program. She travels around Hawke's Bay helping vulnerable families in mouldy houses by giving them tips and kits to improve their living conditions, which sometimes involves spraying vinegar on the mould and then wiping it away.
We go through it with people, so they basically spray the vinegar onto any areas with mould, leave it for 30 minutes to kill the spores, and then wipe it off and throw those cloths away in the rubbish. Because, the spores will continue to live on anything that you've been using.
She reckons she's visited about 150 to 200 houses in the past 4 to 5 years, and it's not just old properties where mould can be a problem.
It's in everyone's home, but it's just particularly bad in some homes where it's a lot harder to ventilate the home if they don't have mechanical ventilation, if they don't open their curtains, because people like to have privacy. So, they don't open their curtains because other people can look straight in and they feel vulnerable.
Recent data from Stats NZ shows nearly 320,000 homes are damp some or all of the time, with some of the worst spots in the North Island. Philippa Howden-Chapman is a professor of public health at Otago University. She says she's not surprised by the number of damp houses, saying it's been like that since the 90s, and blames the high cost to heat homes.
Because we're a temperate, not a tropical country, we need to heat our houses. And because the electricity prices have been rising for residential people, it tends to be the last thing on the list.
She is concerned about the 28,000 kids admitted to hospital each year because they live in mouldy, damp houses. And she says while the government's healthy home reforms on insulation, heating and moisture are a good start, she says they lag behind other countries.
While I've heard a lot of comment by the landlords about how onerous these regulations are, which haven't actually come in yet, and they're still behind what they do in Britain and in Europe. So I think we have to recognise that really we need to up our game on the quality of housing in New Zealand.
Rosemary Goodyear is Stats NZ's subject matter expert on housing and was involved in its general social survey as well as the census, which asked questions about mould.
South Island, the rates of mould were lower, and then higher rates of mould in Northland and also Wellington, Manawatu, Wanganui, etc. We do know that if you've got a damp, humid climate, that's probably likely to have a contribution. Can also depend on a whole lot of other things, type of housing, etc.
She says Stats NZ plans to ask more questions about mould in its next social survey and possibly even the next census to track if houses are getting healthier and government initiatives are making a real-world change. For Checkpoint, call Jonathan Mitchell-Turnay.
A protest aboard an oil drilling ship at the port of Timaru has come to an end, with police forced to build a scaffolding tower to arrest the remaining protesters. The Greenpeace protest began early on Sunday morning with dozens of protesters climbing on board the Scandi Atlantic and chaining themselves to the mast, railings or hanging off the mooring lines. The activists want to stop oil and gas company OMV from drilling 3 oil wells in the Great South Basin off the Otago coast and the Taranaki coast next month. Yesterday, 8 protesters were arrested for trespass and another 6 were arrested this morning for the same offence. Amanda Larson of Greenpeace was watching from the port as the final protesters were taken down late this afternoon. She spoke to our reporter Logan Church.
It's been a really busy day down here at the port of Timaru. We've seen all of the protesters now removed from the oil support vessel Scandi Atlantic. It started with a couple of climbers who were on the mooring lines being removed. They were lowered into a boat and taken away into police custody. Then there were a few people up on the deck of the ship who were locked on who were removed. And then finally, after many hours, the 2 climbers at the top of the mast were just removed by police at sort of 2:33 this afternoon.
So are you still at the port?
Yeah, I'm still at the port now. We've just seen those last 2 climbers being taken away into police custody, so I'm about to head on over to the police station to be able to meet everyone when they come out.
So how did the police get to those last 2 protesters who were right at the top of the ship?
It was a bit of a challenge because they were dangling from the mast there, so the police and the ship's operator had to call in a scaffolding crew who set up a whole scaffold to be able to get in an angle grinder and release them from the positions they were locked onto and carry them down.
And can you see the scaffolding from where you are?
I certainly can, yeah.
And what does it look like? What's its size?
It's quite tall. It's several levels of scaffolding with some sort of spark repellent material around it. It's pretty high up and poking out here in the port of Timaru. You can definitely see it.
Amanda Larson of Greenpeace. In a statement, OMV says they were informed the local authorities have taken further action with respect to the Greenpeace protesters at the port of Timaru. Its spokesperson says the company respects the right to protest if the activities do not threaten health and life of people. But they say OMV equally has a right to go about their lawful activities under permits issued by the Crown. Bit of time for your feedback now. A lot of you getting in touch about National's justice proposals unveiled today. Jeremy says the latest policy shows the National Party is just bereft of talent and fresh ideas. How desperate it is to regain power, and no matter the cost. Dusting off policies from the 70s doesn't cut it, says Jeremy. Graham has gone in touch to say, so the National Party are going to throw petrol on a fire. Their record of treatment has helped drive more people into poverty, resulting in gangs.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata tēnei. A jogger repeatedly punched in the head by a serial attacker preying on lone women says she felt pure terror. The woman was running along a walkway between Browns Bay Road and Beechwood Road on the North Shore when a man who passed her minutes earlier on a set of stairs attacked her from behind. The police have so far identified 4 assaults they believe are linked. The woman who was attacked earlier this month has told Checkpoint the man grabbed her and threw her to the ground.
So I knew I had to protect myself, so I had both my arms over my head, which was why I think he couldn't get to my face. So he just kept punching me in the side of the head, and I was just thinking is he going to stop? It was just pure terror. And then I was just so grateful when he ran away, I just knew it was over.
The woman suffered a dislocated shoulder and concussion along with numerous cuts and bruises. The Health Minister says it'll take time to build a new mental health workforce after the government announced up to 12,000 more people will be trained up in the next 4 years. David Clark made the announcement in South Auckland today. More than 300 nurses will be hired to offer mental health assessments to people when they visit their GP. 8,000 places will be created for people dealing with mental health in community organisations. Dr Clark says more than 3,000 more spaces will be created on the cultural competency program.
It is going to take a while to build these workforces, there's no doubt about that, but we are already making good progress and can report that 550 cultural competencies have taken place, trainings through Lavar here since the middle of the year. We've got 110 nurses already being upskilled.
Health Minister David Clark. A mass vaccination campaign continues in Samoa amid the measles epidemic. Samoa's government today confirmed the death toll has risen sharply to 32, with all but 4 of the victims children under the age of 4. Authorities have vaccinated 24,000 people in a week as they race to provide cover to the entire population. Our correspondent in Apia, Tipi Aotangawaya, has told Checkpoint the deaths are alarming.
We are just hoping that the vaccination, the mass vaccination, which is underway both in Upolu and Savoy Island, will have some sort of relief in the next week or two.
Autangawaya Tipi Autangawaya says he hasn't been vaccinated and can't right now because he's not in a priority group. The authorities are targeting Samoans aged between 6 months and 19 years and all women aged between 20 and 35, except if they're pregnant. The former chief executive of the Hepatitis Foundation says the board chair who racked up more than $128,000 of travel expenses should resign. John Hornell left the foundation in 2015 after 18 years, 13 as chief executive. A 2-year investigation into the charity has revealed the foundation splashed out on lavish dinners, flights and hotels and had credit card expenses unaccounted for. Mr Hornell attended the dinners at what he calls fancy restaurants and describes them as extravagant. He says the board chairperson, Chris Cunningham, needs to go.
It's a bit of a cop-out, and I think if Chris Cunningham has got any manner, he would resign as chairman of the board given his behaviour over the last few years.
Former Hepatitis Foundation Chief Executive John Hornell, Professor Cunningham, has not responded to calls from RNZ. The New Zealand Cricket CEO David White says the racial abuse levelled at England cricketer Jofra Archer came from one man in the crowd. Mr White apologised to Archer in person this afternoon. He says he's disappointed that racial abuse could happen at a ground in this country. New Zealand and England cricket officials are investigating the abuse, which happened on day 5 of the first test at Bay Oval in Mount Maunganui.
Well, one person is one person too many as far as we're concerned. Listen, it's very important for New Zealand cricket that all our fans and our players feel safe. They're in a safe environment.
New Zealand Cricket Chief Executive David White. The $155 million bill to decommission an oil field off the coast of Taranaki may end up being covered by taxpayers. Tamarind Taranaki, which owns the Tui field, went into voluntary receivership earlier this month, meaning the government could be responsible for plugging its wells. Tamarind abandoned a $300 million drilling program at Tui in September after the first of 3 planned wells failed to find oil or gas. Reports suggest the company owes about 80 creditors $190 million. The Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment says if Tamarind is unable to cover Tui's decommissioning costs, the bill may fall on the Crown. 2 kakapo are being returned to their island homes tomorrow after treatment for a deadly fungal disease, leaving only 3 on the mainland. 9 of the critically endangered parrots have died as a result of a rampant aspergillosis outbreak in April. Over 50 were taken to the mainland for treatment, a quarter of the total population. 2 more kakapo will be flown home to Whenuaho Island off Stewart Island tomorrow. Auckland Zoo's Michaeli Wilson hopes the other 3 still receive treatment will be home by Christmas.
Yeah, it's amazing because it was a slog, but just to see them back out there, it's everything is worth it because we can't believe we saved them.
Michaeli Wilson from Auckland Zoo. It's coming up to 6 minutes past 6. Criticised for a lack of backbone in the first test, Black Caps coach Gary Stead is predicting England will bounce back in the second cricket test starting in Hamilton on Friday. English media have labelled their side's innings and 65-run first test loss at Mount Maunganui as feeble and humiliating after they collapsed to be all out for 197. England have now lost 3 of their last 4 tests, but Stead isn't writing them off yet.
I do expect England to bounce back. I mean, they've got some quality players in their team, and we saw through the winter with their Ashes series that they competed toe-for-toe with Australia and sort of kept bouncing back. So certainly we do expect that.
Black Caps coach Gary Stead. Meanwhile, a rib injury is likely to force pace bowler Trent Boult out of the second test, but the team is confident skipper Kane Williamson will play. Boult managed just 1 over on the final day of the test, while Williamson had to leave the field late in the day with a recurring hip problem. Lockie Ferguson is likely to be Boult's replacement. The Australian Scott Wisemantel, who was England's attack coach at the Rugby World Cup, has signed on with the Wallabies under new coach New Zealander Dave Rennie. Aston Villa have given themselves some breathing space above the English Premier League relegation zone following a 2-0 win over Newcastle at Villa Park. The win ended a 3-game losing streak. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, episode 3 of White Silence. marking the Erebus disaster 40 years on. This evening, the Mahon inquiry, the one which concluded there'd been a litany of lying. There's a window on the world of protection dogs, trained to help women who've survived violent attacks return to normal life. And Anne Cohen on the French philosophy of Denis Diderot, born-again atheist and scallywag, on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow for Northland and Auckland. Mainly fine, isolated light showers tonight. Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Cloudy periods, isolated showers this evening and tomorrow afternoon and evening. Some heavy with thunderstorms possible about the ranges of Eastern Bay of Plenty and Taupo tonight. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mainly fine, isolated showers tonight and tomorrow afternoon and evening with thunderstorms possible about the ranges. Waikato to Wellington, including Taihape, Wairarapa, Marlborough, Nelson, Buller and Canterbury. Mostly fine. Westland and Fiordland, rain in Fiordland spreading northwards to the glaciers this evening, then elsewhere tomorrow with some heavy falls. Otago and Southland often cloudy, scattered showers tonight, some heavy with thunderstorms possible in Dunedin and Clutha, rain developing tomorrow. Chatham Islands, fine weather. RNZ National. It's coming up to 9 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Could you bring a better weather forecast next time? It's a bit depressing, wasn't it? This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. National has revealed it would expect judges to hand out tougher sentences if it's in power, even though the judiciary is independent and shouldn't be swayed by the government. Among the party's law and order ideas released today in a discussion document is a proposal for a new armed strike force to, quote, harass gangs. It's modelled on Australia's Strike Force Raptor Squad. National would also push for longer or cumulative sentences, and it's floating a second chance system where some young offenders with a one-off conviction will be able to earn a clean slate. Its Justice spokesperson Mark Mitchell says when they're in power, law and order will be done differently.
We have a very strong focus on sending a signal right now to organised crime and gangs in New Zealand that you're going to face policies next year that the country has not seen before, and we're tired of the misery and the harm that you bring to our communities, and we're going to do something about it.
What do you mean, policies they've never seen before?
Well, number one, with the Strike Force Raptor, all we're doing is we're sort of taking a model that the New South Wales Police have used. It's been very, very successful in driving out the organised outlaw motorbike type gangs. Of course, it's going to be specific to us. We've got some big advantages. That's been very successful. We're going to take that model, but we're going to expand it. And it's going to mean that you're going to see a big specialised squads that have got a capability right through from a forensic and fraud analysis type capability to a dedicated team that can generate a search warrant or a prosecution file, right through to the front line, kicking the doors in at 3 o'clock in the morning, recovering stolen property and firearms and preventing crime.
OK, so that special unit that you're talking about, currently we've got a gang intelligence unit. It involves social development, police, customs, corrections, internal affairs, immigration, and they take a so-called Al Capone approach, which has been mentioned by Stuart Nash, which is, looking at benefit, fraud, tax crimes, getting them by any means necessary. How is what you are proposing any different to what we've already got?
So we will take that and make no mistake, the police have tried for decades in terms of, and have done a good job in many respects in terms of specialised gang units and intelligence units and organised crime units. What we're proposing to do is we're going to turn those units they're not 24/7. There is a disconnect and they can be a little bit disjointed. We're going to do a joined up approach. We're going to have big squads that are going to be operating 7 days a week, 24/7. They can go anywhere in the country and their whole focus is quite simply disrupting and targeting gangs and organised crime.
You call it harassing gangs. What do you mean by that?
Well, just exactly
those are your words in your policy, harass the gangs.
So just exactly what it says is that we are going to harass them. We are not going to. We want to put so much pressure on them that they want to leave a life of crime. They want to actually sit down and reflect and realise that society is saying that we are not going to accept the way that you behave anymore.
And what do you mean by take back control? Control of what?
Well, control of, for example, I had a meeting with some people from Huntly who are very community-minded. They've been working down there. They're Huntly residents. They've seen the intergenerational social issues that are associated with gangs. They want a solution. They want to break that cycle. they want to move in a more positive direction. So we will get alongside them and we will help them. Now, we will use our social investment model, and right alongside that, we'll use our policies around...
So what are you taking control back of then? People? Assets?
People in the community actually want to feel like their police have got control of the streets, not the gangs.
So
and if you go around the country
do police not have
moment,
control of the streets at the moment?
There's a very strong argument to be made that a lot of Kiwis would like to see the police given the tools and the support and even the political will to go out there and actually show very clearly that there's zero tolerance for the gangs, and that they're actually going to show that they're controlling the streets and not the gangs.
But again, my question was, do the police not have control of the streets at the moment?
Let me give you an example. I've had, in the last 2 months, I've had people come to me and say that they're getting out of the security industry in the Auckland CDB because gangs now are carrying guns and they're using them. And
so you don't think, you personally, do you think the police have control of the gang situation?
In that situation, the police need to crack down much harder and make sure that the gangs aren't carrying firearms, and they need the tools to be able to do that. That's why we have our firearm protection
We'll get to that in a minute, but I'd just like, a straightforward answer here. Do the police have control of the situation or not?
I think the police are doing the best that they can, but we could do a lot better.
So what tools do they lack that they need to do this?
Well, I think in our discussion document we've been clear about Strikeforce Raptor, and I think that's going to be a huge circuit breaker in terms of we've never seen anything like this in New Zealand. So
that unit is what, say again?
It's in New South Wales they call it Raptor. So that's the name of it. That's not the name of the unit that we'll put together next year or propose next year.
Are they armed?
Yes, they are.
And so if you were making a similar unit here, would you have those officers armed at all times?
You would definitely have armed officers as part of that unit, without a doubt.
And what other tools would they have available to them?
So they'd have
search powers.
They'd have forensic investigation capability. Yes, we're proposing to tighten up around the gangs in terms of they have to be able to show where their revenue is coming from, how they're buying expensive assets and houses and things like that. They're going to have an ability to be able to generate the paperwork required.
Searching without a warrant?
No, to get search warrants.
Right.
So they'll have that organic capability. They'll have the ability to be able to put a prosecution file together quickly and get it in front of the court quickly. They'll have the ability they'll have armed officers so they can respond to frontline threats with armed gangs. They'll have the frontline guys that kick the doors in at 3 o'clock in the morning to execute a search warrant, recover stolen property.
Is that how you beat the gangs, by kicking in the door at 3 o'clock in the morning?
That's part of the tool, without a doubt, absolutely.
What, just brute force?
Gangs use brute force. Gangs use intimidation and violence. It's a big part of their tool, and that is part of the harassment actually that will occur, is that they will have, if they choose to pursue a life of crime, if they choose to create harm to the community, then they have to realise that there's going to be a warrant, and there'll be the door be getting kicked in at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Because some people listening to this might think that sounds like battling thugs with your own authorised thugs.
Well, you might think that, but we have a world-class police force that are extremely professional, and they'll be motivated and they'll be given the support to go out there and make sure that we start to dismantle organised crime in New Zealand. There is nothing positive, there is nothing good about it, and we're very lucky that we have a world-class police force with an enormous capability
but a world-class
that can do
police force that you currently think can't get the job done.
No, they can get the job done.
Then why do you need this special strike force?
Because they're going to come together now with a focus inside a strike force where they'll be able to do even more. So we're going to enable them, and we're going to put even more pressure on the gangs. We've never done this before in New Zealand. It's time to do it. We've sort of messed around on the fringes and the edges for a long, long time in terms of how we deal with gangs and organised crime, and we're going to make a concerted, focused effort in making sure that we can purge and do as much to get rid of organised crime and gangs in New Zealand as we can.
So are these going to be police officers? Are they going to be soldiers? Will they be wearing uniforms? What are you talking about?
They'll be our existing law enforcement intelligence agencies that will be involved in this. So it'll be our police officers, and part of our policy in our document is the fact that we're going to probably increase the policy around authorised officers, the use of authorised officers,
right,
which will free up more frontline officers that can actually
but the sworn officers
that can actually go and deal.
The sworn officers that are going to be part of this strike force, will they have any greater powers than their work colleagues, uniformed work colleagues patrolling the streets?
No, they won't.
Okay. We're running out of time, but I do want to address a couple of things with you, which is this idea of sentencing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so cumulative sentences. So where you will add the sentences one on top of the other, and the person will serve the whole duration of the sentence. I mean, potentially, does that mean we'd have American-style sentence lengths like 30, 40, 50 years for some people?
Well, I mean, we just want more flexibility around that, because sometimes concurrent sentencing isn't fair. It doesn't actually reflect the seriousness of the offending.
But potentially that's what you could have, isn't it? Sentences of that duration.
Well, that's going to be up to the judge, but absolutely there's potential depending on how serious the offending is. But let me give you a clear example, is that I had a debate in the House with the current Minister, Andrew Little, over the fact that he characterised a indecent assault on a female corrections officer as a pinch on the bottom. So we're going to pass some rules to say that was actually no woman should be able to go should be in their workplace and be subjected to something like that. If you want to offend like that, then actually the sentence will be cumulative, not concurrent. So we want to send a very clear signal that type of offending is completely, totally unacceptable, and we do take it seriously, not like the current government.
So, I mean, National's been very clear that it's going to have an evidence-based justice policy. So what evidence is there that long sentences like that actually prevent reoffending or aid rehabilitation?
Well, number one is I'd have to look and see what the evidence is there, but in terms of
you've suggested the policy without knowing the evidence?
No, in terms of this policy, we're very clear about it, is that if you want to offend, and it's serious offending like that, then we're going to give the judges the ability to make it, to have a cumulative instead of a concurrent
sentencing. But having
sentencing.
clear intentions doesn't mean you have evidence to support it. So
well,
do you have the evidence?
Just very quickly, in terms of rehabilitation, so when they're in prison, of course we want to rehabilitate them. We want them to come out and rejoin society. But let me be very clear. The reason why primarily we put people into prisons is because they're creating harm and victims out in the community. And our primary focus is always making sure that we prevent more harm. And so that's why you're seeing very strong policies like this contained within the document.
Judges already can decide at the moment whether a sentence should be cumulative or concurrent. I mean, how are they doing with balancing that?
Well, we want to send much stronger signals to the judiciary around that in terms of how they're going to approach.
So you're sending the judiciary signals here about what you think they should be doing in terms of sentencing?
Well, it's very clear in the discussion document that that's exactly what we're saying.
So aren't they doing their jobs properly at the moment?
No, I think everyone inside our criminal justice system is highly motivated to do the right thing and do their jobs. But
they have that choice at the moment. They have that choice already. So why do you need to send them a signal? Is it because they're not passing sentences as you would like them to?
Because our criminal justice system does respond to the government of the day and the signals that they send, without a doubt. And we're seeing that right now. We're seeing an increase in gang numbers. We're seeing a reduction in prosecutions being brought.
So why do you think
criminal
that is?
offending. We're seeing more prisoners being released because the justice system will respond to the government of the day. And the
justice system is being influenced by government.
Of course it is.
Government opinion.
Of course it's influenced. Absolutely.
And sentences are being influenced by that as well?
Well, like I said to you, the whole justice system will take note. And in terms of the signals and the legislation and the wishes of the government of the day. So we're signalling because we're going to be fighting the election very hard
So
to
just
return
on that
ourselves
point,
to
and I'm
government
sorry
next
to
year.
interrupt, you raised some significant issues there. So what work has been done on that? Because I'm really interested to know what evidence there is around sentencing and the way the court is receiving these messages from the government and how they're acting. Has there been any work on that?
So I'd have to get it for you, but I'd point you to a report that the Justice Department itself came out with, where they said that there was a response in the justice sector to the signals that was being sent by the government. So they've said that themselves, right? The actual justice,
and so
the Ministry of Justice. So that is what happens, is that if we come into government, we're going to be sending a very clear signal to our justice system that we want to go, that we've got a big focus on gangs, and we're going to disrupt them, we're going to harass them, we're going to try and dismantle them as much as we can next year. And we hope that actually our justice system will respond to that.
Yeah, so what is your message to the judiciary then around that? What's your message?
Well, so basically, we want that if it's serious offending, we would rather see a focus on cumulative sentences rather than concurrent. It's as simple as that.
And so that's National's Justice spokesperson Mark Mitchell. Checkpoint sought comment from the Minister of Justice about Mr Mitchell's claim the judiciary is influenced by the government of the day. Justice Minister Andrew Little says this is an outrageous slur on the independence of the judiciary and the separation of powers from Mr Mitchell. It is almost 23 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Auckland Council sending enforcement officers out to the Waitakere and Hunua ranges this summer to catch any law flouters who use closed tracks and risk spreading the deadly Cody dieback disease. The council has laid charges against a man after he was caught 3 times on a closed track and have issued almost 50 trespass notices to others. Those protecting the track say it's locals who are their own worst enemy, feeling entitled to use the park. Jordan Bond reports.
3 things are asked of visitors to the Waitakere Ranges. Only use open tracks, clean your shoes on the way in and out, and keep your dogs on a leash. But when I arrived at the Arataki Visitor Centre this morning, I spied 2 people dodging the shoe cleaning stations with their dog roaming free. They didn't want to talk to me when I approached them, and it seems they're not the only ones. A local walking guide, Jeff, pumped his fist when he heard someone's being taken to court for refusing to stay off closed tracks.
There's got to be some deterrent to say to people, you've got to realise that we are trying to prevent the spread of Cowrie dieback disease. They have to follow the rules. Life's full of rules. This is just one of them.
David Alexander moved here a year ago and heads to the ranges about once a week.
It seems like the most frustrated people are the people who've lived here all along and have sort of always used these tracks. I can understand a little bit if you, I guess, really feel like this is your home. It's probably hard to see part of it closed. It's one of those things where if you want other people to be able to enjoy it, I think you follow the rules and do the right thing.
The disease travels by soil. Once it gets into Cody roots, there's no cure and the trees slowly die. Cody are considered taonga, treasures, and they're a keystone species. About 17 other plants depend entirely on Cody. Auckland Council closes the tracks in the worst condition to minimise soil movement and is upgrading some with elevated boardwalks or laying more gravel. Its compliance manager, Steve Pearce, says most people respect the closures, but more serious deterrence is needed for some.
Depending on which rules you break, we'll use whatever tool we think is appropriate. So that can include a fine under the Local Government Act. It can include trespass. It can also include infringement notices under different pieces of legislation like the Dog Control Act and the Biosecurity Act.
The Mayor, Phil Goff, says it's regrettable that the council has had to prosecute over the closures, but the man being taken to court was entitled about his access to the area. He faces a maximum penalty of $20,000 if convicted. Almost 40 tracks are open or partially open in the Waitakere Ranges. Dr Mels Barton from the Tree Council says many of them are not in good condition and won't do well with the summer influx of walkers.
So the tracks that were not closed right at the start, they are in a terrible state. They're absolutely shocking. They're far worse than they were when Te Kawerau-Maki said that they were suitable to be left open. And absolutely no work has been done on any of those tracks whatsoever in the last 2 years.
The council's parks manager, Rachel Callagher, says they've been working hard to upgrade a range of tracks all around the region, and they're regularly assessed and maintained.
At the moment, we've got physical work happening in the Waitakere Ranges on around 6 tracks, and that's about to ramp up very shortly. You know, there's going to be a lot more track available to the public in coming weeks and months. And at this stage, if things continue the way that they are, we expect to probably do more than 15 or 20 kilometres above what we'd planned to this year.
Ms Callagher says a few tracks will open very soon and others shortly after Christmas. Te Kawerau-Maki, the mana whenua who implemented Arahui in 2018 to close the entire park, did not respond to requests for comment today. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Jordan Bond, tēnei.
The Samoa Red Cross says people in the Pacific nation are panicking with 32 people confirmed dead from measles. There's almost 2,500 people infected, with 176 of them in hospital. There's been a spike in cases since the mass vaccination program began last week. with nurses saying many will have had the disease and been contagious before the first symptoms were showing. In the last 6 days, 24,000 people across the two main islands of Upolu and Savaii have been vaccinated. The Samoa Red Cross has been assisting the Health Ministry in its program, and New Zealand Red Cross nurses are also on the ground. The Secretary-General of the Samoa Red Cross, Ngāmu Laulu Tautala Mo'ala, told Alex Perrottet some people are too afraid to go to hospital, and she is making use of the long queues at mobile clinics to pass on hygiene advice.
We thought to utilize their time to provide hygiene promotion, especially with the children and their families who come along with them. Overall, we have, for these 3 days, we have gone beyond 8,000 people altogether that we have counted.
Okay, and just confirming, you're counting those 8,000 people as being immunised in the last few days, is that right?
Immunised, and people and their families that are coming along with them.
Right, because the government figures today have skyrocketed. They've got 2,437 current cases, and that's over 240 in the last 24 hours. In your opinion and the way you're looking at this, can you explain why they seem to have spiked in the last few days? We've got 32 deaths now, but despite the large amount of vaccinations happening, I suppose that it just wasn't quick enough to stem that flow of people getting infected.
These people, I'm sure the number is actually from the people that have already been infected, because we've just started vaccination, this week. This is a mass vaccination. But these have been people who have been at the hospital, hospitalized. So I'm sure that number is okay.
What do you observe, and what's the Red Cross doing in terms of providing other places where people can go? Because we hear that the hospitals are overcrowded, the conditions aren't going to be great there. What's the plan in place when so many cases are abounding in terms of keeping people quarantined and away from their families? What's the plan there?
There's already there's already sites all over the country. There's also mobile clinics that are going into the communities. So all of that is actually capturing and following up on our people that haven't been vaccinated. We know that people are sort of frightened to go to the hospital, because they knew that there's infectious, patients in the hospital already. It's that kind of panic thinking that a lot of our people have, and they want to go elsewhere, to receive their vaccinations from.
And that was Ngāmu Laulu Tautala Mo'ala from Samoa's Red Cross talking to Alex Perrottet. Quick bit of feedback before we go for the evening. Mark Mitchell, Justice spokesperson from National. This person says, was that guy really from the National Party or Team America World Police? David says, no correlation between length of sentence and deterrence. Do National just want vengeance or justice?
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. An Auckland jogger repeatedly punched in the head by a serial attacker preying on lone women has told of her pure terror. She's one of 4 assault victims identified by police so far. Samoan authorities have vaccinated tens of thousands of people in their campaign against the current measles outbreak, with the death toll rising to 32, most of them young children. And the New Zealand Cricket CEO, David White, today apologised to England cricketer Jofra Archer for the racial abuse levelled at him by an onlooker. Our next news will be at 7 o'clock.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
And we wonder why, in a country that's otherwise so wonderful, we just have this dark side.
Live with local, national and international stories as they happen.
And as Martin Lee, one of the godfathers of Hong Kong democracy, an icon here, put it during the umbrella movement in 2014, it's the choice of a rotten apple, a rotten banana and rotten orange.